Hey guys, and welcome to the Kurima Podcast, where we talk about business, finance, entrepreneurship, and real estate. I'm your host, Jason Kurima, and I have Nick Coble joining me today. Nick, it's a pleasure to have you, man.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here. I appreciate you inviting me, and I've seen a few of your podcasts. You got good stuff going. I'm happy to be a part of it.
Well, I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Thank you. So, Nick, tell me about your journey and how you got started. Like, what got you into real estate originally, and is this kind of what you originally thought you were going to do, or is this a completely different path than you thought you'd be at?
Yeah, so I don't know. I mean, everybody's got a unique story, I guess, but some parts of mine might be a little bit unique. Growing up, I grew up on a farm. Multi-generation farm. Didn't actually do any farming. We leased everything out. My grandfather had rentals. He hated it. Never made any money at it. Always had problems. So I always heard the downside of the rental market, but I also always heard him talk about how they didn't make land anymore. That it was a commodity, and that. And I could see that the path of land ownership, real estate ownership, was a profitable gig, right? Fast forward into high school, I kind of went through the construction stage. I took carpentry in high school, started working on remodel crews not long after high school. Got into the cabinet industry, that sort of thing. I joked around with my girlfriend, wife now. Seeing different things like that. Is like, one of these days I'm going to be the real estate landlord. I'm going to be the what's that word? I'm going to be a slumlord one of these days, right?
Oh,
So I joked around about that as a high school student, but I never really saw a clear path towards that, right? Bought our first house in 2008, right at the peak of the crash. I mean, I was working in the cabinet industry, doing a lot of stuff with new home builds, new kitchens, that sort of thing. Had gotten laid off, moved to a different part of the country for a short time, trying to establish that. We went over to Tulsa, Oklahoma for a short time. Came back over, bought the place. What ended up being my first rental, but at the time we were thinking it was probably going to be somewhat, maybe not forever home, but a long-term home. Mm-hmm. We were in there, like I said, 2008 to 2011. Turned out that we were leaning towards going back to the family farm. Wanted to help around the farm, bring our kids up in that same community that we grew up in. So we made the decision to move. Didn't make sense to sell the house at the time. Values had tanked a little bit. We were, kind of on a bottom end of the scale and coming back up. So didn't want to be, negative equity on it. Didn't know any of those terms at the time, but I thought, man, if I could find somebody to just at least pay for the expenses, mm-hmm. Then I'll just let them rent it for those expenses, and then we won't have to worry about it. So we were a landlord for 10 years before we really knew anything that we were, what we were doing or anything like that. I had shifted out of the construction industry and into like an ag market, doing aftermarket parts and agricultural irrigation sales. Getting to a point, it was a good point in my life where with that job I was able to dive into my kids' school activities and stuff like that. I had a really family friendly. They were neighbors of ours, old friends of ours, so they were really good about letting me off work to go to kids' events and stuff like that. That was the reason I had taken that job, a large portion of it. That's good. So I was getting more involved with our kids in sports and their activities. But the money just wasn't flowing like I wanted it to, right?
Yeah. And how old are your kids now?
So now I have a 18-year-old going to be here in a couple of weeks, and one that just turned 21. Okay. So, yeah. And so anyway, 2020 was really the start of my real estate investment journey. I was looking for ways to make a little bit of extra money. I had pitched a couple ideas to the team that I was working with. They weren't fast adopters of anything.
Yeah.
anything change wise. So nothing went very far in that sense. And so I thought, I had some friends of mine reach out to me and say, hey, we're going to dive into this Rich Dad, Poor Dad study, right? We're going to read the book, talk about it, that sort of thing. And so I don't read. I've got ADHD, can't sit there and look at a book for that long. So I found it on YouTube, actually. Played it on YouTube just in an earbud while I was working. One day. I actually turned it on like hyperspeed, like 2x or whatever, and I listened to it like 3 times that day.
Yeah.
And it was like, it's just a flip, a switch flipped in my mind, and I was like, I got to do something like this. Mm-hmm. And so the original thought was, hey, I just want to buy 1 or 2 and start trying to just build some sort of a, backup retirement plan or, whatever, just have some income on the side that way. Not sure if I was going to get into flipping or whatever, but I was just kind of really diving in. So I hit the podcasts, I hit the bigger pocket forums, all of that stuff, and just dove in head over heels into it, and was binging content almost 24/7, driving my wife nuts, and did that for about 3 months. So it was probably April of 2020 that I went out and I found the cheapest house on the MLS that I could find, that I thought I could do the least amount of work to try to get it livable, rent ready. Mm-hmm. And so I did that. And so that was really the start, I guess, of my real estate adventures.
That's cool. It's really cool that you mentioned you and a group of guys got together and we're reading Rich Dad, Poor Dad and all that. I just started a group, and we're actually meeting tonight, and we're going to discuss that. They're supposed to read the first 3 chapters. Yep. And when I told everyone to read the first 3 chapters, my thought process is, 3 chapters isn't much. Well, I looked on the Audible thing, because I usually use Audible, mm-hmm. and it's like 3 hours, almost 3 hours of reading. And I was like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
I mean, I ended up reading it in like an hour because I did the 1.5 or 2 times, whatever. But yeah. Didn't mean to make it. I guess there's only 9 chapters in the book or something, so I didn't realize it was a third of it. YouTube
Premium and Audible are 2 of the most highest ROI investments I've made.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, just getting that content where you can just turn it on and listen to it in the background, not have your screen going.
Yeah.
For the YouTube Premium, and then the Audible, where you just have books rolling in every month. Yeah.
I mean, I talk about that a lot too. People think, I'll just listen to the ads on YouTube or whatever. To me, it's like it saves me so much time. Having to deal with all that. Yeah. I mean, it's like $18 a month. But
back when I first started really listening to stuff on YouTube on a regular basis, I couldn't play, like my phone had to be on, the screen had to be running,
and not being able to lock it.
You couldn't lock the screen or it'd shut off, right? And so that aspect alone was worth the YouTube Premium for me, so I didn't drain my battery just by walking around the work yard and stuff like that with it playing in the background.
Yeah. I finally met someone else that agrees with me on that, because it seems like a lot of people think it's ridiculous that you pay that much for that, but I did the exact same thing. I think that was my main reason, because it would drive me crazy every time I'd lock my screen.
Yeah.
But
I haven't watched a YouTube ad in years.
Okay, so what's one of the best lessons you've learned in life?
One of the best lessons I've learned in life. So my dad used to tell me something that drove me nuts as a kid, but I tell you, it's really it's resonated with me for the last several years, going through new mindset journeys and that sort of thing. But he'd say, anytime I got in trouble, he'd say, "You're a good kid, but sometimes you need to act like it." Right? And it would infuriate me as a kid, because I'm like, he's calling me an idiot, right? Like, he's trying to do it nicely, but he's calling me an idiot, right? Yeah. But no, realistically, like that act accordingly mindset is huge. And sometimes, I had no idea what I was doing as a real estate investor, diving in. I'd be making phone calls and asking people to do things that they'd never heard of before.
Yeah.
But I heard it on a podcast and I knew it was possible, type of thing, or whatever. And so so even though I'd never executed a deal like that or done anything, as long as I was able to act accordingly, right? Then a lot of times, people would put stock in making it at least look like you knew what you were talking about, right? And so I don't think it matters in any aspect of life, whether you're a kid or a teenager getting into trouble or whatever. Sometimes you have to act like a good kid to be a good kid, right? But sometimes you got to act like the real estate investor, or sometimes you got to act like the business entrepreneur, right? You don't see a T-Rex walking around playing with a ball of yarn, meowing.
Yeah.
Right. T-Rex do T-Rex things and cats do cats things.
Yeah.
So you got to act accordingly.
You got to have that confidence to, that people will take you seriously.
Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like I had a lot of that being like younger and people not taking me serious for a while. Like that was really frustrating, but eventually you get to a point where they kind of see your track record and then they take you more seriously.
Absolutely.
So
absolutely. Sometimes you just have to act the part before you can do it. I mean, I don't really like the fact of, the saying, fake it till you make it, right? But in a sense, right? But you can be confident in even the things you haven't executed yourself because you've done your research, correctly.
Yeah.
So, and I don't think that's faking it, right? That's maybe having scientists, they have a hypothesis, right, before they have a workable theory.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, same concept.
Yeah. So what does believe in yourself mean to you?
Believe in yourself. I mean, it goes back to that same act accordingly, right? I mean, you can't act accordingly unless you believe what you're acting is the way it's supposed to be.
Yeah.
There's I think the identity in the world today is a huge deficit. I think you can see that in current events and the way culture is moving. Identity crisis is a huge, almost pandemic.
Yeah.
Right. So believing in yourself is very important, right? Because if you can't believe in yourself, you don't know who you are.
Yeah.
And that's why we have men trying to be women and getting into the Olympics and causing stirs or whatever.
Yeah.
I think identity crisis is a huge thing. So for me, believing in myself, I mean, I would not have taken the first step in real estate unless I believed in some sense that I could do it, right? A lot of people look at me and they say that I've got confidence or that I have this cockiness to me at times or whatever. I think a lot of people who even come off that way have their own insecurities in their own way, right? There's always these things in the background that they're insecure about or whatever. I think the difference is they have that mindset of believe in yourself and they just go out and overcome it no matter what.
So tell me more about your first deal. How did you find it? How did you fund it? How did that all start? Yeah.
So the very first one, like I mentioned, I was kind of just wanting to go out and prove a theory. I remember reaching out to a gentleman that I knew was in the real estate market, doing big things, making big moves, who is now more of a mentor of mine. But I remember reaching out to him and I'm being like, hey, if I find this house and I buy it and I figure out a way to fix it up and get it rented out, and then I try to refinance it and get all my money back out of it, do you think that would work? Would that be a good thing? And I remember he just replied back, yes, because I'd never even heard of the Burr method, right?
Yeah.
But essentially that's what I was, in my mind, that's what I'd kind of figured out. Whether I had actually heard it, through the bigger pockets or something like that, and just hadn't put all the pieces yet and attached that Burr name to it yet.
Yeah.
Or what? It was interesting. So
who was that?
Who was that? That was Caleb Marty.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah. But that was actually my first time even reaching out to him. I was just like, hey, I know you're doing this and whatever. Like, what do you think about this? Do you think this would work? And just like, yeah. And that was it.
That's funny.
But
in the beginning, though, it's hard to because there's so much information. So
right.
it takes like a lot of research to figure out what you're actually doing, and then figure out what it's called that you're doing.
Yeah. So the first one, that's all I wanted to do was just prove a theory, right? Just to see if it would work. So I didn't have any money, right? I mean, we're rolling into the to the Corona, the COVID-19, the pandemic, and so I remember talking to my wife about this, saying, "Hey, I think I'm going to do this," and she's like, "I don't know, like this sounds totally crazy. Like I don't know if this is going to work or not." And so she was really worried about tapping into our personal finances to do anything. And so I don't know whether it was a $600 Uncle Joe check or whatever, whatever you want to call it. Yeah. I don't remember, but I do remember I set up and I said, look, if I can do this and just take this money and go figure it out, are you okay with that? She's like, if you're not tapping into our personal savings and that sort of thing, like if you're not getting into that, she's like, I'll be behind you. I'll do whatever. But she thought it was crazy. And so that's what I did, right? I went out and I got on the state website and I created an LLC. It cost me like $52 or something like that, right? I started a commercial bank account, put an initial deposit of like $100 in there, right? And I went to my banker and I'm like, I've got this house that I've owned for 10 years. It's a rental now, and I want to do this HELOC thing, right? I want to pull my equity out of it, and I want to go buy something else. And I'm like, this is gold. Like this is going to work great. And they're like, no, you can't get a HELOC on a rental property. And so they shut me down, right? And so that was one of my first lessons in real estate, is that terms matter, right? What you say matters. And so me calling it a HELOC, even though I owned it, it was in my personal name. It wasn't my primary residence. And so they weren't going to give me a HELOC on it.
The banker should know what you're trying to say, though.
Yeah, right. But I'm telling you, they completely shut me down. And what I've learned from this specific bank is they are not real estate friendly, right? Yeah. As for that stuff, they've really done very little for me in the real estate world. And so I went away from that meeting pretty defeated, right? Yeah. And thinking, well, what am I going to do now? I've been all in on this. I had this figured out. And so I was talking back and forth to him and whatever. I'm like, look, people are doing this all the time. Like surely this will work, type of thing. And so we talked back and forth a little bit. We were talking about what I did, and I was like, what if I put a loan on my truck, and what if I do this? And I'm throwing all these ideas out there. And they said, hey, you own some cattle, right? And so, living on the family farm, we had taken over the cattle operation, and so my sister and I jointly owned the cattle that we raised on the family farm. And so, even though I didn't own any of the acreage, we had some equity there in the cattle. Didn't know anything on any of that stuff. So I took. So they ended up setting me a line of credit on the value of 50% of the cattle that were owned. So, so it wasn't crazy. I think I ended up with like roughly like a $20,000 line of credit. So nothing crazy, but I thought, man, let's just go see if I can find a house for under $20K, right? And so I started. I mean, the only thing I knew to do is to get on the MLS. And so I'm looking, and I find this little turd of a one-bedroom house. A couple others too.
One bedroom?
Yeah. So one of them was I think there's 2 1-bedrooms and maybe a 2-bedroom. There's 2 or 3 of them that I was kind of like narrowing it all down to. Yeah. And they were all like 20 to 30,000 listed, and under. And so 2 of them were in like the $15,000 range, and I thought maybe I can get one of those, and maybe I can fix it up. And so I go walk these properties, and the 2-bedroom that I look at, it feels like you're going to fall through the floor in any given moment. One of the 1-bedrooms, like the whole backside of the house didn't even have a roof anymore, and so I'm like, oh my gosh, like there's no way that like I don't want to start with something this heavy, you know what I mean, as my first deal. And so I get to this next 1-bedroom, and it's got decent bones. It's ugly, like it's got some issues, but I'm like, I think I can work with this. And so I thought I'm just going to throw this stupid crazy price out there, and I'm going to shoot them with $8,000. So I get a hold of the real estate person, small town, that I grew up in, where everybody knows everybody. And so I knew the real estate agent. And I said, here's what I want to do. And they're like, well, this thing's been on the market for like a year. They're definitely motivated. I'm not going to tell you what you can do because they're my client. You know what I mean? I'm not going to, give you any heads up. But I can tell you, I think they'd be motivated if you want to throw them an offer. So I thought I threw out $8,000, and I thought there's no way. Maybe they'll counter back, and we'll hit midway or whatever. Within like 20 minutes, I had a yes. Dang. And I was like, man, I should have offered $5. I don't know. And so I bought it. Did it like a cash transaction using that line of credit. Mm-hmm. Ended up spending about $7,000 to $8,000 in materials. I basically just paint. I had to replace a window and some studs around the exterior wall, on one exterior wall in the kitchen. Some of the windows had already been replaced. Had a decent roof on it. I didn't really do anything to the exterior. Matter of fact, I still have not done anything to the exterior to this day. It's still an ugly looking little turd. But I almost want to preserve it that way. But no, it's kind of a weird property because and I didn't want to put a ton of money into it because it sets right on the edge of a historical park. So there's a birthplace of a president, right there in the hometown. And so it was rumored right before COVID that they were wanting to buy those properties, tear the houses down, and expand the park. Because my property and one more are the only ones in these block that aren't already park owned. So I thought, well, I don't want to put too much money into this thing if they're just going to try to buy it and tear it down, right? They're probably not going to give me anything for it. So that was part of my reasoning for not putting a whole bunch of money into it, but I wanted to make sure it was safe and livable and that sort of thing. So I had to fix a couple places. There's big old charred marks behind the stove where something had arced, so I replaced some electrical and painted a bunch of stuff. Had to do some repairs in the bathroom. It was a little soft. I had to do some floor repairs there, like I said, that one window. But almost everything else was just cosmetic. I did put new cabinets in. It was like a 10-foot long wall, wall-to-wall, basic kitchen. So yeah, I ended up, about $15,000 all in, and I just right after work I'd go over there and work, and I'd work till 11:30 midnight. That was probably the only, well, not the only one. I can't say the only one, but it was one of the few that like the whole family would come over and we would paint, and do different things. Yeah. It was the first one, and so they were trying to get on board with my little new adventure. Yeah. Because I always go all in on things whenever I do, change ideas or kind of a new direction, right?
Yeah. A lot of people have the same story. Like for us, like at the phone store, or when we first started our phone store, I think I was in college and had one or two, maybe it was just one job at the time, but we go to school, go to work, after work around 5 or 6, work until like midnight or 1, sometimes 1. Yeah. And then just repeat the same process every day until the store was done. So I mean, you got to do whatever it takes to get
absolutely.
And we didn't have money starting out, so we couldn't just hire it. At least that was our story. So no, that was an interesting time. I mean, we knocked that thing out in like 3 weeks, and during that time frame I was doing some networking and trying to attend a new local meetup that was starting up, and getting introduced to a local private lender that did kind of hard money type terms. And so I was having conversations with them, and in one of those conversations he says, "Hey, you said you're invested in this town," and I said, "Yeah, that's where I invest." Or that's where I live. That's where I'm focusing on right at the moment. He said, I had a guy that tried to sell me a property there. We bought some properties in this other town that's more in my wheelhouse. This particular property is probably just outside my wheelhouse. It's not the one I'm interested in buying right now. But he said, I think it would be a good opportunity for somebody. So I'm like, okay, yeah, you want to lend on it, because it's trying to establish this private lender. He's like, no. He says, really, it's outside of my buy box, my lend box for that, especially on a first project with somebody.
And so I'm like, oh, okay. So, but he's like, you at least ought to talk to him and see what you can do. So I call the guy up, and we're talking about the deal and what it is. And so it's a 5-plex, right there in my hometown. Price seems right. We start talking about it, and he's like, hey, it's my last property that I need to get rid of. I'm moving to Maine. Like I want to do all these things. And he says, yeah, I kind of want to get rid of it. He said, I just signed papers with a realtor. They haven't even put it on live yet, but we're hitting it pretty close. And so I said, yeah, well, who's your realtor? Same realtor I'd used
Nice.
on the last transaction. So I'm like, okay, maybe I need to call this gal. And so we talk a little bit, and he basically lays out for me exactly what he needs. He's like, once I've already got her signed into it, so we don't want to work the realtor out of the deal. Here's what we need to do. And so we back into it. And so we basically come up with a number that he's like, if you offer this is going to cover this. It's going to get my deal, my needs. And he said, I'd accept it. So, so then it's like, okay, now how do I make this thing work? And so there again, talking to other people, I'm this gentleman that I talked to that gave me the one-word answer, basically, that's now a mentor of mine. I'm talking to him a little bit more. I think I had met him in person then finally at that point through this meetup. And so, yeah, he's leading me to different banks that might work with me a little bit better. So I'm having those conversations, and I'm just trying to feed that network, right? Put those tools in my tool belt on what I can put together. And so they connect me with this banker that they say this person's really working well with investors. So I start having the conversations with them. I start telling them what I'm trying to do and what I've tried to do and got turned down on and whatnot. And they're like, oh, well, we'll give you a line of credit on that house, So where I was told no by one bank, the other bank was super interested in doing it. So April I make an offer on a 1-bedroom house. By May, I think it was May 7th, I closed. June 7th, I had another closing already lined up, so that I refinanced the first property with the bank that wouldn't give me the line of credit to begin with. And then as soon as we made that deal and I had that check in hand, then I went over to the second closing table where we were refinancing my old primary house, pulling the equity out of that. And so I took that equity and the check that I got on the refinance for the 1-bedroom house, and I bought the 5-plex. Nice. So I went from one house to technically 2 as what I would consider my first actual real estate investment deal. Mm-hmm. Because the first one, my old primary, I never looked at it as an investment until I started kind of having that financial awakening, I almost call it, right? Yeah. So it happened really, really quick. We went from like April, I think it was March when I started, when I had that Rich Dad Poor Dad reading. April, I made my first, or maybe it was January, February. Anyway, it was about 3 months, I guess, that I kind of dove in. And it was like April, May, June. So by June 7th, I had 7 doors. By the end of that year, I think I had 10. I found another bank that was doing some cool stuff. We were doing like an as completed appraisal on like Burr properties. Mm-hmm. So it wasn't really even a true construction loan. And so I was able to get into those pretty much no money. They would just use the sweat equity of the future value as my down payment, which it's harder to find banks to do that these days. Yeah. But that was working out well for me at that time. So yeah, by the end of 2020, I think I had 10. And it's hard to remember exactly how the numbers went, but the next year I think I probably had 15, 16, something like that, to 20. I've sold some, bought some more, that sort of thing. So today, over several partnerships, that sort of thing, I think we're setting around 60, 70 doors.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah.
So what do you like more? Do you like single family or multifamily, or trailer parks?
I would love to get into more bigger deals. I have not broken what I would consider the big deal threshold. So I do have the 5-plex. That was my second deal. It's definitely more profitable having more doors under one roof.
Yeah.
I would love to have more multifamily properties. Got a couple duplexes, some things like that. And then we've got a mobile home park that has a 24-unit storage facility. I'm not sold on the storage facilities myself. It just came with the deal type of deal. But
what's the reason? Is it just because they're smaller, like $50 a month, $80 a month?
Yeah, I mean, I think especially in my little market and maybe the surrounding markets that I'm looking to go into, I think they're saturated. I think that would probably be reason number one. Chasing $35-$50 gross per door, you know what I mean, just doesn't excite me. Not to say that, in the scheme of things, if you're looking at a 200-300 unit, building and it's managed well, you know what I mean, you wouldn't do well on it.
Yeah.
It just hadn't hit my focus, hadn't excited me enough to do so. I think there's a lot of people killing it in the storage markets. So I think there's definitely opportunity out there. Just one I haven't focused on.
Yeah.
So the mobile home RV park, I'm kind of digging that. Not to say we haven't had our issues with it, our challenges, but it's a small park, 17 units. We're getting ready to add another 9 to 11 units onto it. Looking at another one through another partnership here coming up that might be a good deal. But I would love to get into the bigger multifamily stuff.
Yeah.
Just
so is that
taking that leap?
Is that one of your goals that you're working towards right now?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, in the back of my head, yes. How do I want to put that? It's however much focus you put into something is what you're going to get out of it, right? Yep. And so honestly, I mean, I could say, well, nothing's out there, nothing's coming my way, but I haven't put any offers on anything either. So, so it's as much as I would love to, like I haven't put the focus it would deserve to get into it. So, I'm doing too well on single family stuff. Finding, I guess everybody's got different markets. My specific market, I'm still finding $50,000, $60,000 purchases that are worth $90,000, $110,000.
Yeah.
And so if I can buy 60-cent dollars, I'm going to buy every single one of them I can.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of where I'm at. I mean, as much as I would love to get out of the single family and get into some bigger stuff, it's just working too well for me where I'm at, and it takes too much of my focus right at the moment. So
we're at the point now where we're trying to navigate this stuff. Like my focus is definitely the bigger stuff, but then we keep getting fed some of the little stuff and it's very profitable. So
right.
I think it's just kind of an addition to what I'm after. But it's nice getting, as we grow, it's just nice being able to own a lot more flips and stuff. Yeah. And then that just kind of feeds to the bigger deals.
Yeah. If I can put a little bit more focus on automating what I'm doing currently, so that I've got key team players that are taking care of it for me more, then I could focus on some bigger stuff and kind of scale forward that way. That's probably where I'm at right now. I've kind of hit that point where I've got enough. So what was it? This is 2024, 2020, late 2022. I think I left my W-2 and started doing this full time. I went in to go get a scope GI, and they told me I had COVID. I had no symptoms, didn't feel bad, whatever. But they did their little test. They said, "Oh, you have COVID. We can't do. You need to go home. You need to quarantine or whatever." Maybe this. I don't remember if this 21 or 22. Anyway, so mid-January, had a house that we had just had a big freeze come through. So I had a house that we had been working on. I had it set and vacant. Pipes froze. So I spent that 2 weeks laying underneath the house, redoing all the plumbing and working on this house. And so I had kind of hit a point where I won't say burnout, but I was not spending the 6, 8, 10 hours after my W-2 working on the house every night, So that house, we're the first one we took 3 weeks to get it going. This one I'd been setting on for 8 months. So that 2-week period that I had COVID, that I was working on this house, I thought that was a perfect opportunity to isolate myself or whatever and just bear down and do anything. So like I said, I didn't have any symptoms, wasn't feeling bad. So I got more done in that 2 weeks than I almost had the full 8 months.
Dang.
And so I started looking at that, and that was a property that there again we had bought it right. I didn't have a whole lot into it. The refi, I was going to make $25,000-$30,000. I had another property that I had bought that we were doing a refi on at the same time. This would have been 21. Is that right? I think it was 21. Anyway, I didn't really do any work to it. It was the same type of deal. We bought it right. We're doing a refi. We were pulling some cash out, going to make like 20. Anyway, the check between the two is going to be like $50,000. And so I was like, if I've got this one closing that's going to net me $50,000, that's this non-taxable income because it's loan proceeds. It's not. It's not a sale or anything like that that's going to generate a taxable event. So I got to thinking like why am I wasting my money? I'm making X and I'm paying guys X to do things because I don't have the time or don't have the desire to because I'm getting too tired of working on this stuff all the time. Like I'm not making any spread that way, right? So why do I don't just do this myself, make it my job, and if I do 2, 3, 4 houses a year, like I could replace my salary very easily.
Yeah, and you're working for yourself.
And I'm working for myself. I can make my own hours and do my own thing and that sort of thing. So I took the leap and I went in and I had the conversation and I just said, hey, I'm going to get you through this last season. They wanted to take some vacations after their season and stuff like that, but so yeah, it was Labor Day weekend that year. When I left for Labor Day weekend, I didn't go back. So what was the conversation with your wife? Because I think a lot of people struggle with that, because you basically are jumping all in. It was the same conversation from 2020 all over again. Like, how are we going to do this? What are we going to do? She was starting to see it, like she was seeing the checks. Mm-hmm. She was seeing what was going on. But yeah, that fear was still there. So it was another one of those, as long as we don't take money out of our personal stuff, you know what I mean? Like, as long as this doesn't set us back, like I'll support you if this is what you think you want to do. But yeah. And so, yeah, it's those conversations are hard, right? Especially when you've got two individuals that, not to say that you don't see eye to eye, because we work together very well on stuff, but she is very conservative, right? Yeah. If you've ever done the personality tests and that sort of thing, like she's the blue and I'm the yellow red, type individual. And so we're almost polar opposites. It was interesting when we took that personality test. We went to a seminar type thing, and the leaders of the seminar are like, "Oh my gosh, we just had to meet you guys because your profiles are almost the exact opposite." Yeah. And it's very rare that we see people that are 100% completely opposite, like together. Because hers was like all blue and a little bit of red, and then like no little to no white and like no yellow, and I'm like all yellow and a little bit of yeah. So anyway, she also knows once I get something in my mind, like there's not very good way of talking me out of something, right? So she pleads her case and she said, this is my concerns. If we can mitigate those, then I guess I'll have to be okay with it. Is probably more what she was thinking. Yeah. But
so did you ever get her to read Rich Dad Poor Dad?
No. Yeah, she does. I don't think she has. Yeah, I would like her to. I mean, that's something that. Well, I say that. So she doesn't like to fly. So a lot of our vacations we end up going Emerald Coast, Pensacola, Navarre, Destin, right in through there, Florida. Yep. And so if we hit those areas, we drive 10, 12 hours, something like that, depending on where we go down through there. More like 11 to 13, probably, depending on where we're going down through there. But so anyway, a lot of times on these bigger trips, I will put on an audiobook, and they just either have to listen to it or put some earbuds in and do their own thing. So I've probably played it, and she's probably had to listen to a portion of it, but I don't think she's ever read it for her own.
Yeah.
She's not a reader either, really. She's busy doing her own other things.
Yeah.
But.
So for us, like, because I told Haley, like, one day we're gonna have a Lamborghini, one day we're gonna do this and that and that, and so she just, she thought that was for other people, not for us. Yeah. And she thought it was unrealistic, and she still thinks it's unpractical, but she at least knows it's realistic today, because we went to a lot of seminars. We read Rich Dad Poor Dad together. We did a lot of stuff. And after like the second seminar, she was like, okay, yes, I can see how this is possible for like anyone. Yeah. So if you can just open your mind to the possibility, then the possibilities are endless, right?
Right. So. And it's funny you say that. I remember sitting down whenever I was first looking to get into the real estate world, and thinking this is for other people, right? How I know people are doing this, but I can't do it. I can't figure it out. And I remember trying to pencil it out and think, so I mentioned we bought our first house in 2008, and then we moved in 2011. Well, when we moved, we just rented again for a few years. And it wasn't until 2016 that we were in a weird situation where I was renting a house for a friend of mine that trying to help them out. He was going through some hard time, trying not to have a divorce, different things. So we said, hey, we'll rent your house, help you out so you're not losing the house. Turned out they weren't paying the mortgage, so they were, we got the foreclosure notices, and we're like, hey, wait, now we've been paying on this thing for a year and a half for them, trying to help them not lose it. Anyway, so that's a whole nother side story. But we, when I was going through all of that, we ended up buying the house that we're in and setting it up on the family property. And so that was 2016. So I'm like, okay, so we got married in 2001, bought a house in 2007 or 2008 into 2009 there, bought the next place in 2000. So I'm like, okay, so it takes me 7 years to save up and buy a house, and I'm figuring all this out, and I need X number of dollars to quit my job, and I'm trying to do all the math. And it turned out, I was like, okay, if I do it and kind of keep this same momentum, I should be able to retire by the time I'm 140. You know what I mean? Yeah. And so it's like, oh, yeah, the math doesn't work on this. Like, how do you do this?
And thinking that long term, like even the 7 years, I started cringing. I was like, 7 years to save up enough. Like, yeah, I don't know. It's just hard to like.
Yeah. And so it's like, there's got to be different ways to do this, right? And so you just start cramming this information, and you start finding these little creative, tidbits or whatever. And so, yeah, so I don't know anything, right? I just regurgitate what everybody else is, what has worked for somebody else. Yeah. And so, yeah, we just started finding these creative options to just scale. Yeah. Had some pretty cool deals that way. Yeah.
It's cool seeing that too. Like, I started the same way. Like we started getting a lot bigger faster because we were able to figure out like creative ways to do it. Because if we didn't, it would have just taken so much longer to get where we're at. So.
Yeah. I wish I could find more packages and stuff like that to do those big creative deals. Those are the most fun. Like,
it's exciting when you do a bigger deal than you've ever done. Like, so. And then you do a smaller deal, and it's just like another. Yeah. Not to discredit those deals, but it's just not nearly as exciting as something that's big, you know? But I don't know. So how have you grown over the years, and is there something that makes you more successful than you used to be?
So any of my success is borrowed. Like I say, I don't know anything myself. I just regurgitate what everybody else is doing. Yeah. Right. So networking has been key for me. Getting in the right rooms, talking, being the dumb one in the room. That's not hard to do. But no, from day one, whenever I was very first starting to do this, like I sought out these these meetups, that sort of thing. The gentleman that I told you is kind of a mentor of mine. He's got a group, a paid group that I'm in, that we, learn from, that sort of thing. I've traveled to different cities over the U.S., going to get in these rooms of other like-minded real estate individuals and business individuals, to do these events type of thing, because you never know who you're going to talk to and what little conversation could spark something that just, almost has a paradigm shift right in your life. Mm-hmm. And it's funny, I had a conversation with some guys in a group one time that was, I don't even remember what was said, and it had nothing to do with really what I got out of it. But when we got done with this conversation, I thought, I wonder, we had a bank that I was doing some stuff with. It wasn't really doing much with me real estate wise, but they liked business and equipment. And I thought, I wonder if I can take all this different equipment that I've got, that I've accumulated over the years. I wonder if I can get a line of credit on that. Right. And so just that one conversation, we were talking about leveraging, different things or whatever. And I thought, gosh, how can I do this? So, I would go out then and I would find, I'd get a good deal on a trailer and buy a trailer for $500 or $1,000, or I'd buy this or I'd buy that. You know what I mean? And then I'd take it to the bank and I'd say, hey, I've got this I've got this list of things. Like, can you give me a line of credit on this? And a lot of times they would give you replacement value on it, not necessarily what you purchased it for, right? Because you already own it, right? You don't have to. You're not saying give me 80% of the purchase value, right? Just give me 80% of the current value on it. And so like, I got a $40,000 line of credit on stuff that I probably only had like maybe $15,000 in, and so it was things like that it's like how can you not just create value out of thin air, you know what I mean, but how can you leverage one thing into something that will move the needle just a little bit farther on the other end. Yeah. And it it doesn't matter whether it's an object or a person or whatever. Like, I saw this thing on Facebook and it really resonated with me, that reminds me of how to get creative in the business and the real estate world. It said, I told my son, you're going to marry the girl I want you to marry. And he says, no. And I said, well, it's Bill Gates' daughter. And he says, well, okay. Right. So I call Bill Gates and I say, your daughter's going to marry my son. And he says, no. And he says, well, my son's the CEO of World Bank. And he says, well, okay. So I call World Bank and I say, you're going to make my son CEO of the bank. And he says, no, we're not. He says, well, he's Bill Gates' daughter, or he's Bill Gates' son-in-law. And I'm like, okay, right? Yeah. And so you take an idea, and you make it happen, right? That's believing in yourself. That's
you manifest in a way.
You manifest in a way, and it's not necessarily. I don't really like the term law of attraction, right? Because there's a lot wrong with that. Mm-hmm. Not everybody can law of attract and manifest winning the lottery, right? Everybody wants to do it, and you're only going to have one or two or a few winners, right? Anyway, law of diminishing, all that kind of stuff. So there's a lot wrong with the law of attraction, but at the same time, it's biblical that what you put your effort into is what you get your results back on. Yep.
As you sow, shall you reap.
As you sow, you shall reap, right? And there's a lot of things like that there is a law that backs that up, right? Yeah. But anyway, like I say, that was an interesting take on it. But really, that's really how I live my life and how I do things is I don't know. Some people might look at it
together.
How can you piece it together, right? Yeah. Right. Some people can look at that and they can say, "Oh, you're just being manipulative and you're twisting things to get your way," and that's not what it is, right? Mm-hmm. It's putting the right deal together. Yeah. Yeah. And it's what are the pieces? Who does it take? And how can I solve these problems?
Yeah. And Rich Dad talks about that a lot. How can I?
How can I?
Not, I can't afford this. How can I afford this?
Right. So
it just it opens your mind to so many possibilities.
A lot. Yeah.
Me and my wife talk about some of those like things that just seem impossible. Like, what would it look like if we did this? Or what would it, like
sometimes it
like
just
that.
takes an ask, right?
Yeah.
So, through a partnership, we had started trying to get into wholesaling a little bit, and it wasn't working out real well. But a couple of the deals we put together worked out fairly well, and one of them was a duplex that came up on the list, right? So I call on the list. Call the duplex owner and I say, hey, I see you've got this property, something you want to sell. Well, actually, we had somebody else call on the list. They found out they would sell it or whatever, so they gave it to me as a warm lead. So I call them up and I say, hey, I hear you're looking at maybe selling this. What are you looking to get out of it? That sort of thing. We start having this conversation, and he shoots me a price, and it's okay, but it's not a home run deal. You know what I mean? Not anything I'm really wanting to actively pursue because it was in a new city. City wasn't very far from us. It was definitely within our circle of what we'd be willing to do. Obviously it was part of the list of why we were calling them in the first place. But it didn't excite me, right? And so we're talking to the guy or whatever, and he's like, yeah, he said, honestly, he said, I've got a few properties. I wouldn't mind selling some, but I don't want to pay the sales tax, or I don't want to pay those capital gains.
Yeah.
And so, trigger in my mind, right? And I start thinking, okay, well, what else do you have for sale? So he gives me 3 or 4 addresses, and we drive around to look at them or whatever. And I said, well, what if I could put something together and solve your problem, right? Or what if I could figure out a way where you don't have to pay capital gains on them? So we talked a little bit, and it took us almost a year probably to go through that whole process of talking to them. We'd get together, we'd talk, we'd look at them, but the list kept growing. And so it ended up, we had 9 properties, 10 doors, that one duplex and some other houses split between 2 different towns. And it worked out well. The guy says, basically, he says, I'd like to still get some income, but I'm kind of done being a landlord. I don't want to go deal with these tenants anymore. I've got too many things going on with family and taking care of, sick family members and that sort of thing. He said, I just need some time back. And so we worked out a deal where he seller financed us the whole package.
Nice.
So he pays sale tax on the monthly payment that pays capital gains tax on the principal that's being paid.
Yeah. It's per year, right? It comes out
per
to
year.
you.
I say that. He's not paying tax on that necessarily. He's paying tax on the interest that we pay him because we're not even paying him a principal payment. We've got it set up as interest-only payment. We had it set up so we said, hey, we'll refinance one property a year out for you or whatever you want to. We'll set it up so that you wherever it is, 2 or 3 a year. I think I set it up. The initial page I gave him was a 5-year payout, right? So maybe a couple of properties a year, trying to get him whatever it was, $150,000 a year or something. I don't remember exactly what the terms were, but we'll pay off a couple of properties a year. We'll get you X number of dollars a year, and that way you get your payout if you want it or whatever, and your accountant can kind of stretch those taxes out with everything else you're doing and keep you underneath that tax burden. And so I sent it to him. He went and checked it with his accountant. He checked it with a couple of banker friends that he had, and they all liked it well enough. So we ended up setting up the deal where it's like 5% interest only. We technically don't have a in term because he's not like so far he hasn't even taken a payout at all. He just says, hey, I sold another farm, personal farm deal or whatever. We don't want the tax burden. We don't need the cash right now, so we'd rather just keep the higher monthly payment. So yeah, just don't worry about paying us right now. So at this point, I mean, part of me doesn't even care if we ever pay him off. You know what I mean? We're
because it cash flows, right?
Because it cash flows very, very well, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, we took over the property for him. They're all in our name. He's got a lien just like a bank, so he still has the opportunity to foreclose if anything happens. So he's got his checks and balances. He's getting his monthly income that works for him and works for us, and it was a win-win situation all the way around.
Yeah.
And so yeah, we walked to the closing table on that one, With, what was that, like it's like $2,700 out of pocket for closing costs on a 10 house package.
Dang.
So, when you're paying $200 of property out of pocket, that's a pretty good acquisition. That was one of my favorite deals.
That's really
they're almost all my favorites in a way. I could probably go on deal upon deal upon deal. But
the biggest thing that I took away from that is you don't know until you ask.
You don't know until you ask.
Had you not asked, do you have any other properties you'd consider selling? Like, we had a deal. I was trying to buy these storage units, and in the end, we couldn't come to an agreement. Like, he decided that he wants to keep it in his family or something. But out of that, we're buying this other property he has not far from the lake.
Yeah.
And so just because I asked, do you have anything else you'd consider selling? And then, so you just never know.
Yeah.
The answer is always no until you ask.
That's right. Yep. Yeah, we're looking at a package of properties right now that we went to go look at just a few little quadplexes or whatever, but it's turned into a potential 90-unit deal. Dang. So we're still looking at that and trying to see the feasibility and how it'll work and what we can acquire and how, find that win-win situation for everybody to get it all executed properly. But
well, that's one of those big exciting deals.
Yeah, right. So we'll see. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it may turn into nothing. We may only end up with just a few that we went after, but but there's always that potential. It's always out there. So you ask a couple of questions and how can we solve your problem? How can you solve our problem? Because that's the greatest feeling in the world is when you can find that mutual area where everybody wins.
Yeah.
So there's a stigma of landlords out there taking advantage and tearing up the real estate market by buying things out from under people and being swindly and stuff like that. But there's a lot of good ones out there too that they want to solve your problem.
And then also everyone thinks that just landlords are making all this money. Sometimes that's not the case. There's a lot of times that that's not the case.
Yeah, well, I mean, so like whenever I went to go leave my W-2, my first thought was, well, I'm going to live off the cash flow, right? But honestly, it's not the cash flow that I live off of, right? It's the
cash out refinances.
It's the value that I'm generating in other ways, whether it's a cash out refinance, adding value, what still leads to a cash out refinance. I mean, there's been a couple of sales, where I've generated, sales, capital gains, whatever you want to call it that way. But yeah, the cash flow itself, it's pretty hard to live off the cash flow unless maybe you're Airbnb-ing or doing something where you have a really high cash flow. But even there, I would be a little bit afraid of it because the cash flow can go away pretty quick.
Yeah.
Whether it's a repair, whether it's a market change, whether, whatever. But
so I made a big mistake. I didn't have an inspection done on an apartment complex I bought because that's typically we got to the point where on our houses and stuff, we just had our contractor tell us all the stuff that needed done. Yeah. So we thought it was fine. Well, it turns out
I rarely had an inspection done myself. Yeah.
Yeah. But anyway, so on bigger commercial deals, I think I'm going to start doing that, have those inspections done because there's so many things that we could accidentally overlook that are a big problem that we didn't know, didn't have the money set aside for in the budget and stuff like that. But anyways, I need a freaking roof on one of my things, and I got a bid for $32,000, and I'm just like, crap. But luckily, we did a refinance recently, so we might use that to pay it. But
right. Yeah, there's always the chance that the big stuff comes up, right? And it doesn't take very many big things to sink a ship. Yeah. Right. Yeah. You get the little AC units, and AC units aren't that little sometimes, but but you get a water heater or something like that. Those are easy holes to plug in the bottom of the boat, right? But you get the cannonballs of the $30,000 roofs or the like an AC unit could be $10,000. Yeah. So.
But I don't know. I'm kicking myself because I feel like that's such an entry level mistake, and I feel like I shouldn't have made that mistake. But
yeah. We talk about all the good stuff, that happens, but there's always those weird ones too.
yeah,
The tenants you move in and then never pay after they pay their first deposit and first month's rent, and then you got to evict them out, and
the drama of some tenants.
the drama of tenants. Yeah. Tenants themselves can be a downside. To the rental market for sure. Yeah. But problems. I joke around that nothing is unfigure-outable.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, that's a really good one. And then we were talking earlier about thank God for the problems that we have today, because years ago we probably were praying to be in the position that we have these problems.
Yeah.
And so it's cool. I don't know. Right now the roof seems like a huge deal, but I have the money from all the sources of everything that I can take care of it. It's really not. Yeah. It's not going to sink my ship. Yeah. So. But if it feels like a big storm right now.
Yeah, and that's a really good point. So when we were landlords and not real estate investors in my mind, right? When I had a rental for 10 years, we were stressing out all the time. Every time the tenant was late, we got to come up with that money, right? It's, if something didn't happen or something went out, if there was a problem, so we had a tornado go through. This is a story I haven't told in a while, so. I almost forgot about it again since we've got so many other real estate stories now. But we had a tornado go through the area and just a couple of blocks over demolished the school down to the ground, right? And so the house itself wasn't hurt, but shingles were pulled up and turned and stuff. So I went ahead and put a claim on the shingles for the roof, and of course I thought I'm a construction guy. I'll just go over there and do it myself. No big deal. And so I get over there actually on an Easter weekend. Went over there. Some of my family, I think my sister and her kids maybe came over one day. My sister-in-law and her boyfriend at the time came over and helped one day. But we tore all one side off and redid that side. And man, I was like, man, I'm just getting too old and. I just can't do this stuff anymore. And so I got one side done, and I rolled the shingles over. I even tarped the peak, and I called a contractor buddy of mine. I'm like, hey, I started this. Can you finish it? I didn't, I left it at a point where it's going to be real easy to do your thing or whatever. Can you go back over and do the other side of this house? Typical ranch style roof, real easy. Looking back, I probably just should have buckled up and just finished it up myself, but. So he's like, yeah, no problem. We were still getting some storms rolling through different times or whatever. So I got woke up a little extra early one morning. I'm in my living room. I think I was doing a Bible study or something like that for a men's breakfast or something that I was probably in charge of in the next couple of days or something along those lines, or a Sunday school class or something. But I was kind of feeling like I'm awake for some reason type of thing. And I get this call 4:30 in the morning.
Oh, wow.
And it's the tenant, and they're like, there's water pouring in the house, sheetrock's starting to fall from the ceiling, like something's wrong. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, a storm came through, ripped my tarp off, you know what I mean? And so 4:30 in the morning, by the time I start getting around and ready to go, it's 5 in the morning, nothing's open. So Walmart was still open 24 hours. This is pre-COVID.
That drives me crazy.
Is it funny how things change?
Yeah, I never thought that would have happened, but that drives me nuts. I mean, I don't know how often I need to go to Walmart, but when I can't, it just drives me crazy.
That's right. But in this case, it needed to happen, and so I roll up at Walmart Supercenter. I grab the biggest tarps they have, enough that I figure I can cover the whole roof, type of thing. Throw them in the truck, drive the hour, to this property that I am, you know what I mean, that I'm away.
Yeah.
And I get there, and what had happened was the crew had been there, had tore off a third of the roof and hadn't finished before some rain started coming through or whatever. So they had just put their synthetic felt back up and had just hammer tacked it, right? So it was just staples and synthetic felt.
Yeah.
And left it, thought it was secured that way. And so the wind came, ripped all the synthetic felt off. It was a late 70s, early 80s house that had the 1x slats. So between every slat, there's a little bit of a gap there. Could be an 1/8 inch, could be sometimes as big as an inch. If you've ever, had to tear off a roof like that. And so every one of those gaps, water was just pouring in. We were getting like 4 inches an hour. And so I call, part of me was like, it's not my problem. You know what I mean? It is my problem. But what I was getting at with that is when you have one house, everything is your problem. Like, you have no way of I guess, supplementing that unless you just have heavy cash reserves. In this instance, there again, the contractor was a friend of mine. I called my insurance company because I already had a roof claim. They considered it negligence. They weren't going to cover anything. So that part of the claim was denied. They had enough claims on their own insurance. They didn't want to put any more claims on their insurance.
The contractor.
The contractor. So if there wasn't a good, I guess, communication and a good relationship between them and I, or if that contractor wouldn't have been, what's the word I want to use? Have integrity, right?
Yeah.
Then that could have been a real big problem. But they went through. They worked with me. We got it all fixed. There's a certain amount of things that we did for the whole house. I mean, you don't just replace carpet in half the house whenever it goes out, or flooring in half the house. You got popcorn ceilings, so you don't refinish popcorn. Not popcorn ceiling in half the house, but still have popcorn ceilings in the rest of the house. So I mean, there's certain things that we did on the whole house and had to remodel it. But that house had basically got a full remodel, and not totally on my own dime because of the circumstances, right? They took responsibility and helped get it taken care of. But they were also able to use their resources and their network to get it done cheaper than probably the negligence side of their insurance, right? If their insurance would have been way up or that sort of thing, or if it had gone through insurance, everybody would have put high bids in and would have cost somebody way more. So it all worked out. It worked out very well. My renters had renters insurance, so they were able to at least get their comfort covered on their side of things and their stuff. But yeah, when you have one rental, something big comes up, it's a big deal. But when you've got 10 or 20 or 30, right, you can kind of use the rest of the resources to cover that one problem. And so there's actually less stress, in my opinion, with scale than there is. I mean, not to say your problems aren't different, but
what's one of your favorite business books? I'm guessing Rich Dad Poor Dad.
Well, obviously, Rich Dad Poor Dad was a very integral part of my journey. I mean, you think you hear that resounding all the way around.
Yeah.
Most of the time, that's probably one of the top three, if not the top one that you hear in every podcast. You probably hear this on a regular basis too, but for me, it's the Bible. The Bible talks about money and finances more than it does about love, more than it does about heaven and hell combined. That's a lot of people don't realize that, but the Bible has a lot to say about money and finances. And so business-wise, the Bible has been, like I say, very pivotal in my life.
Yeah.
But no, I mean, there's a lot of good ones out there, and I'm not much of a reader, but I do listen to a lot of content. And so there again, a lot of podcasts, a lot of audiobooks. There's some good Christian authors that have some really good business type models out there. I should have looked at this list before I came in here today, just to give you some good ones. But any of like the Gene Wickman, the
Traction,
and yeah.
What the heck is EOS? Stuff like that.
The EOS type books. Anything that talks about EOS is very good. The 4-Hour Work Week. That's Tim
Ferriss.
Tim Ferriss. Yep. I'm horrible with names, so this is there again, I meant to look all of this before I came in, and I didn't.
No, you're good.
Got busy.
So what about the Bible? Like, I'd say Proverbs is definitely a really good one. And
Yeah,
then I like Matthew
Proverbs,
a lot.
a little bit of Ecclesiastes. Matthew is very good. There's also definitely some good ones there. But yeah, I won't say any. A lot of Jesus's Sermon on the Mount, his type of stuff talks about that. Really, the whole Bible. I could talk about this all day long. The whole Bible is all about investing, God investing in us investing in others, right? From
I never thought about it like that.
Yeah,
but that's really true.
It is really true. So from the very beginning, right? The first words, the first commandments God gave Adam and Eve was be fruitful and multiply, right? And he wasn't just talking about have a bunch of babies, right? He was talking about building what we see today. You know what I mean? He was talking about being fruitful and multiplying in everything that they did, building his kingdom, right? And so from the very beginning, it talks about being productive, right? Mm-hmm. Getting out there, doing your thing.
So how important is it for you to have, like, do you think business and finance should be separated, or do you think they should just be who you are, or what's your opinion on that?
Business and finance is separated.
Sorry. If I said business finance, I meant business and like God. Like, do you think you should keep
religion and business should be kept separate? I don't think so. For me, for me, everything's eternal, right? I look at everything eternal. When I look at my investments, like I strive for an infinite return, right? I want to find those deals that I can get all my money back out of, type of thing. You know what I mean? So that eternal, that infinite mindset rings steady all the way across the board. And so, for me, my faith is supposed to be everything in everything that I do, right? Mm-hmm. And so, I don't think it needs to be that way. They talk about the separation of church and state. If you actually read into the documents and stuff like that, those words were never spoken anywhere. It's not even a real thing. I can see where some religious ideas maybe should be kept separate from some business ideas. I mean, there's certain things that you have to keep, personal life and business separate, right? Sometimes you can't make decisions that work with business and church together or something like that. I mean, there's always different compartments that things need to go in some way, shape, or form, right? But it's still all the same storage. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I guess I get what you're saying.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Water's made up of now I'm gonna sound stupid because I'm not even gonna say it right? But what is it? It's H2O, right? So
oxygen, it's two, hydrogen.
Hydrogen. I was gonna say, I was gonna get that wrong. Hydrogen, but yeah. So even water, right, is oxygen and hydrogen. Oh. It's two separate entities, right? Two separate parts, but it creates one finished product.
Yeah.
Right. So even though I think a lot of things have to have different integral parts that are totally separate, I believe they create one solid product. So I would not be the same business person without my religion, and I would not be the same. I would not be the same in my faith without my personal experiences and my business experiences.
Yeah. So what struggles are you encountering or have you encountered, and how are you getting through them, like in your business?
Yeah. So there's always different struggles, and it seems like in every season, the struggles might be a little bit different. In today's market, there are certain things. Housing availability is a little bit different, whether people are keeping a hold of things because the interest rates are higher or because they're not wanting to buy anything new because the interest rates are higher, right? So higher interest is causing some issues. Inflation's causing issues in material availability. COVID, when that all happened, we had different availability issues, that sort of thing. People are working different, right? Whether they're working from home or a lot of people got laid off or started their own businesses. It seems like the trades these days, there's nobody working in the trades, it doesn't seem like. So we're having issues finding, good HVAC guys, good carpenters, good roofers. Keeping reliable help and contractors is a huge thing. We were having a conversation about this before the podcast, but there, like I say, for me myself. My biggest issue, I think, is hitting that point where the real estate has become bigger than I can do myself, right? Mm-hmm. And so I've got to find the right people and get them in the right roles to continue scaling. Yeah. And so I won't say that I've hit a wall. There's certain areas that I'm doing very well in that way, and then there's certain areas that definitely need improvement. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it's getting to that point where not being a one-man show isn't going to work anymore. If I'm going to scale and get any bigger, like there's got to be some integral people involved on a regular basis. And so transitioning through that is probably my personal biggest struggle. Mm-hmm. And so we're looking at all kinds of things. We're trying to decide, who to bring on full time, where to bring on full time first, type of thing. Yeah. If we can afford it, how many deals do we have to do to add how many people, It's just playing that balance of finding the right income versus outgoing expenses, right? To make it scale properly. Mm-hmm.
So, that one's kind of tricky at times.
It's tricky at times, yeah. But it's, like I say, nothing's unfigureoutable. We'll get through it and we'll figure it out.
Yeah. And then there's always like if I hire someone now, like it'll solve this problem, but eventually I might run out of stuff for them to do. Mm-hmm. And then it's scary. Like, well, then I'm just paying for them to not do anything. Yep. So like, do I add another person? Do I wait? But then if you wait too long, then you're screwed and you're like way overworked. Yeah. So yeah, balance.
So all the different economic, situations that are going on are all feeding into that, right? So because of the higher interest rates and the inflation on materials and that sort of things, right? The pool of good deals out there, right, are getting smaller. Yeah. You've got to find the right deal that's making sense, that can justify all the numbers. Mm. And then, even though that's getting smaller, the deal flow itself, right, because people aren't selling or people aren't moving on to other properties, because of the same reasons, right? Mm-hmm. So the deal flow is a little bit smaller. So you got to make sure the deal flow that is there so that you can keep those deals going, so you can keep your people busy, right? Yeah. And so it like all of those aspects are all hitting you. So yeah, you start walking into that spider web of which string do I start pulling on first, right, to get myself out of this. Yeah. Yeah.
So much easier like said than done. Like, I'll just do this, but it's just not always that easy. Yeah. So, is there anything that you're scared to do, but you need to do it, that's going to take you to the next level?
I'm scared of everything and scared of nothing at the same time. You know what I mean? Like, yeah. Like there are certain things that scare me. I mean, like you said, hiring into people and keeping them busy, keeping them on task. I'm a great starter. I'm a horrible finisher, right? So finding the right person to be that finisher is definitely going to be key on my side of things. I'm taking on another role here that we probably don't necessarily want to talk about too much right at the moment, but it's taken a ton of my time right now. With meetings, with networking and that sort of thing, it's really taken a toll on the productivity of me getting stuff done. So being, some of those things, like taking those leaps, knowing that those are going to get you ahead in certain areas, like it forces your hand to come around and fix these other problems, right? Yeah. So for me, that's the part of being fearless. Like, I'm not afraid to try new things. I'm not afraid to get out there and jump in. Like I said, I went all in on real estate in just a matter of a few months, and went from no real knowledge into buying my first one, into to 2 to 7 to 10 to whatever.
Yeah.
So things happen when I make moves, right? And new problems come up. So yeah, I'm always willing to take the next move. But yeah, some of those steps are pretty scary, right? Yeah. Jumping into to buying something into something you're not sure that you can take care of or do, or quitting your job or whatever. Like, those are some big moves. And so yeah, sometimes you just got to do it. But for me, I'm old enough that I've realized what works for me and what doesn't, right? And so I know that if I'm not putting myself out there, I will get very lazy and very lax, and I'll enter that comfort zone and stay there pretty easily, right? Yeah. So I know that I have to put myself in uncomfortable positions so that I can make positive momentum. Yeah. I don't know if that answered the question. But.
No, I'm thinking about that too. Like, I think that's kind of how I am. And so, yeah, if you're not constantly growing, then you're kind of dying. So
yeah. So in the Bible, there is a story that talks about the passivity, right? And so, well, a couple of different stories, right? For one, David. It starts off, and I don't have the verses and chapter to give you right off the top of my head, so you can look this up later. But it starts off the chapter in this particular story that when it was a time for the kings to be out at war, right? David was sitting at home. He's on his rooftop. Sees Bathsheba, right? She's bathing over there, and so in his passivity, right? It caused him to sin, right? Yeah. To go over to pursue her. He even had a guy killed to take her as his wife. I mean, there again, he had repercussions and all that. You can go in and read that whole story. There was another king that it talks about in the Bible, King Ahab, right? And in his passivity, he wanted a piece of ground, wanted real estate, couldn't get it. So he's sitting there sulking, being passive about it. His wife, who he says was, he says no king was more evil in the sight of the Lord than King Ahab, under the influence of his wife Jezebel, right? Yeah. And so in his passivity, his wife goes out and takes the land and does things that way. And so in these stories of passivity and the sin that's around that, right? Then I've realized that for me myself, I would come home and kind of check out at a certain point, right? And I still struggle with this on certain levels. But I would get in my recliner at the time, right, and turn on the TV and just veg out. Yeah. Whether I'm playing a video game on my phone or computer with a TV going on or whatever, trying to get my little quiet time, me time or whatever. But I would hit this point and I would just check out. And I didn't see this at the time, but even like with my kids would try to come tell me something or whatever, and I wasn't as attentive as I should have been or whatever, scrolling Facebook, playing video games, TV going on, shh, I'm trying to watch this, whatever. Yeah. And so I can look back and see these these passivity times, right? And so at different times I've tried to take some of that content that was just mind-numbing, scrolling, whatever, and try to replace it with podcasts, video, something that's going to give me a little bit more education type stuff. Yeah. But that's a couple of like biblical stories that really have nothing to do with finance and business, but at the same time it does, right? Yeah. The fact that if you're not being fruitful and multiply, right? Those are the side effects.
So what I'm thinking about kind of as you were saying that is like how me and Haley geared everything is we like to be as passive as possible, but we also, there's like something in me that still likes to work. So I have my schedule to where I typically work around 20 hours a week, and I feel pretty good about that. But then lately in the last few weeks, it's probably been closer to like 50, 60 hours. And so I'm not enjoying it, but I'm going through a lot of storms and I'm trying to put all of these fires out and solve all these problems. So finally, I'm almost through the storm, it feels like. So that's good.
Yeah.
But, I always wonder, like, am I reaching my full potential by working these 20 hours a week? Because I feel like 20 hours is good because it helps me to stay creative. Because if I'm too engulfed in the business, then I'm not thinking creatively.
Correct.
Because I can't see very far past my problems. And that's what, in my mind, has always helped me is, like, no matter what circumstance I'm in, I can always visualize in my head what I see, like what our vision for our company is, what my goals are, all that stuff. So I go back and forth between, am I doing enough, and am I, do I like having it set up this way, and will this take me to where I want to go?
Yeah. Well, and there's different forms of passivity too, right? So, like, for me, sitting on my butt, scrolling through mindless content or watching TV, right? There's nothing productive out of that, right? I'm being passive in a disconnected way, right? But for somebody, they could see passivity as not actively working, right? Not, outside of my 20 hours that I want to focus on work, right? But then that other time, you may be 100% engaged with your family.
Yeah.
Right? That's not total passivity, right?
Yeah.
That's not passivity with a disconnection, right? That is, call it work-life balance, home-life balance, or whatever you can call it, probably 100 different things. But
I see what you're saying.
Right. So there's definitely different aspects of that. I'm not saying that you've got to be working 24/7 or you're not being productive or you're not being fruitful and multiplying to your potential, right? There's another old story that I've heard, and I couldn't back this up. I mean, it was through a study that I did, actually through Kirk Cameron's Monumental, I do believe, kind of an in-depth study, if you've seen that documentary or done a study similar to that. But anyway, it talks about a woman that was born, and I'm going to get these numbers wrong. Like, there again, I haven't rehearsed this story or anything, so this is just my recollection of it. But she was born to say 20 or 30 other siblings, right? She was one of, like, say 27 or 28 or something like that.
Dang, that's crazy.
Yeah, and so she grew up in a family. In there again, I don't know the year, time frame, or whatnot. I should probably know my history better than this, but especially if I'm going to tell a story like this. But anyway, but she's growing up in more of the colonial times, and so family life was hard. They're working the ground. Their community is their home, right? And so who knows? Maybe, I don't know how much love and attention they got from parents with 27 kids. Like, I got 2, and it's hard to keep track of both of them sometimes.
Same.
So it was just a different mindset, different time frame. But she had a vision of reaching all kinds of people, right? For the Lord, right? Being productive that way. Well, she went on to get married and have like 17, 18 kids of her own. But 2 of those kids were John Wesley and his brother. And so they went out and they started this movement, the Methodist movement back in the day, and ministered to thousands and thousands and thousands, right?
Dang, I didn't know the background of their story. That's cool.
Yeah. So anyway, it's an interesting story of that. Just because your vision to reach whatever, or maybe your vision is to buy 1 million homes or whatever, like, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to do that all yourself, right? But your impact through every encounter that you have, whether it be your kids, whether it be your podcast, whether it be your networking or whatever, right? If you can inspire one other person, right, that one other person is going to go do something, right? And to me, that's being fruitful and multiplying, right? So even though her and her own stance was one of 28 siblings or whatever it was, and she was just a homemaker, right? Mm-hmm. And led a family of another 17 or 18 or maybe it was 27 or 28 kids, right? Yeah. Doesn't seem probably exciting and life fulfilling at the time, right? Yeah. But through her intentionality, right? For her being intentional, if intentionality is probably not a word, but through her being intentional, right, with her own family, she raised up individuals that went out and made a difference in the world. Yeah. Right. So
probably a bigger vision than she even had.
So if by what I was saying, if you were thinking, oh, well, maybe 20 hours a week, maybe that goal is not aggressive enough. Maybe it's exactly where you need to be, right? Maybe you need to be raising up that generation of your kids. Maybe that you only having to work 20 hours, but having all that time for your family is going to create the next generation that's going to go out there and make an even bigger impact than you were able to make in your life, right? Yeah. Or
that's really cool to
maybe
think about.
maybe that gives you time to do the podcast or the networking that you need to do to reach and talk to other individuals that would then motivate them to get out there and do their thing and reach the next generation or whatever. And so it's like a ripple effect, right? The one stone, when you throw it in a pond, doesn't affect the bank, right? But every ripple does. And every ripple of the water will erode, and you've seen Grand Canyon or all these different, natural monuments where waters, hit it in millions and millions of years, right? It doesn't just take one touch. Yeah. So a lot of times we think, what can I do? But you don't know the impact that you have. Yeah. So just be fruitful and multiply and be intentional with your days now. And who knows where the impact can go.
To go off of that, Zig Ziglar, do you know who that is? Mm-hmm. He had a story about there was a guy, a grandson and his grandpa walking down the beach, and every so often the grandpa would grab a sand dollar and throw it back into the sea that was on the beach. And he kept doing that for a while, and he's like, Grandpa, why are you doing that? Like, what possible difference does it make there's millions of them out here. And he's like, to this one, it means the world. And so if you just, you saved one, it doesn't seem like a big impact, but you never know. Like if that one reproduced, or whatever, I don't know how those things are, but it saves one, just like that's applicable to anything. Yep. Same with God. Like if you save one soul, just like the John Wesley story, think about how big of an impact that has.
Exactly.
So what legacy do you want to leave?
For me, I guess the word legacy doesn't really mean much to me. I guess because I'm kind of an infinite mindset guy, like certain parameters, like it doesn't really come to me, right? Yeah. I guess a few of my short-term goals or eventual goals that I want to accomplish while I'm here is, I want to be a guy that can live on 10% of what I earn and give away 90%.
That's awesome.
So I don't know exactly what that looks like for sure. I don't really care what's written on my tombstone. I joke around with my wife, like when I die, just roll me off in a ditch somewhere. I'm going to be dead. I don't care. You know what I mean? What happens to this body? It makes no difference to me. So, So I don't really care what people remember me by, you know what I mean? I don't really do this to make other people think different about me, not to say that it makes everybody feel good when somebody says, hey, this guy did this or whatever, and I'm looking at that, that always puffs you up a little bit or whatever, but that's not what I'm after. I don't really care. I'm kind of an introverted extrovert or extroverted introvert. I don't know which one it is, but I don't mind talking and doing that sort of thing. But I would be perfectly okay with living in the mountains as a hermit. You know what I mean, and never talking to anybody else. I think. On a certain level. So, So it really doesn't matter to me. Even like with what I'm building, I guess you want to call it, with the real estate stuff. My kids at this point don't have a whole lot of interest in it. They were almost grown when I first started this project. I mean, I was just a year or two into investing when my daughter she was listening to me enough. She went ahead and bought her first house at 18,
Nice.
right? So she's making better moves than we did at that age. But she's 21 now, and they're not trying to be an active part of in the real estate game with me or anything like that. So I don't know that they're, I'm not trying to create something to pass along to them so they can go bigger or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's just, like I said, it started as where can I make a little extra money so I can be a little bit more, have a little bit more freedom and maybe have a little less stress in the financial market type stuff. I tried something and it worked, and it just keeps growing, and that type of thing. I'm kind of a fly by the seat of your pants kind of guy, So yeah. So when people ask me, what's your goals, what's your legacy, things like that, I never have a great answer, but I do know that, the Bible says, be fruitful and multiply. Right.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to be fruitful and multiply for as long as I can make it work. And, if real estate quits working for me, I'll find the next thing that does. Mm-hmm. And who knows, I may have an epiphany tomorrow that may pivot me and move me into a whole another segment. You know what I mean? So
yeah.
You just never know.
So what was it for you that really made Be Fruitful and Multiply stick out to you so much? Because it seems very, I don't know, it seems like a big part of your life.
It is. It does. I guess for me, when I first started down this path, I wasn't looking at it from a spiritual perspective or anything like that. Like I said, I was really fitting a carnal need of, I think I need more money, type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
That's really where it came out of. But as I started diving into the real estate world and reading all these books, or I say reading, listening to all these books and podcasts and that sort of thing, going to these different events, hearing these different speakers, I'd hear something and this is what works. And I'd think, man, that's a biblical concept, right? And so I started getting into these almost mirror studies of, this is what the world says, this is what the Bible says, right?
Yeah.
And I started putting all this together, and I started seeing how the Bible was more of an investment book, right?
Mm-hmm.
Of God putting that investment into us and wanting us to invest into His kingdom and to His people, right? So those types of things, like I said, got me into those veins and that mindset. And there's a guy out there that I've done some of his studies and some of his groups, called Wealth with God. James Baker is his name. Not like James Baker and Tammy Faye, if you're familiar with any of the spiritual stuff and whatever, where he was a prosperity preacher and had a bunch of scandals and that sort of thing back in probably would have been 80s or 90s. Might be too young for you, to recognize that. You're not that much younger than me, but. Anyway, lost my whole train of thought there now. Be fruitful and multiply. What does it mean, right? So through some of those different studies, I started recognizing, like I said, just the parallels between what the world says is success and what the Bible says is success.
Yeah. And
to me, it was just a reverberating theme throughout the Bible, and so yeah. So if I see those reverberating themes like that, and if I see that that's what the Bible says that you should be, then that's what I'm going to try to emulate.
So how can people connect with you?
I'm probably the most active on Facebook and Messenger, Nick Coble.5, or maybe it's Nick.Coble.5. I should probably look that up and know that 100% too.
I'll put it in the comments.
Yeah. But those are probably where I'm most active. I'm on, really all the social media platforms. I'm even trying TikTok. I'm a little old for that. I mean, it was still Musical.ly whenever I first heard about it, and my kids were using it, So, but yeah, I'm on all the platforms: Facebook, Instagram, X, Twitter, whatever you call it now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you have a final message for our audience?
I think the first piece of advice that I'd give anybody is just take action, right? I used to remember the posters you'd get from the schoolhouse or the book fairs, right? The school book fairs. And there'd be one posted on the library wall or whatever that said knowledge is power, right? And I think that is total garbage. I think that's what they try to teach you in school. But what I really think that should say is knowledge is potential power. And the Bible talks about that. It says faith without works is dead. You need to take action. God says, I don't want your sacrifice. I want your obedience. I want you to walk in my obedience. And so I think the first piece of advice I would give anybody is to take action. Go out, learn, invest in yourself, but take action and follow up on what you learn.
Absolutely. That was amazing, man.
Yeah.
Well, thank you guys for watching the Kurima Podcast. Make sure to like and subscribe, and we'll see you on the next video.